In this video segment, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about couplers, Kadee couplers, and adjusting the heights and trimming the trip pins. There's a couple of different methods to this. My friend Rich prefers to completely cut off the trip pins on his cars, and that's what he's done. As you can see, no trip pins. I don't like to do that on my cars. I like the look of the hose connection. Well, if you bend and cut the couplers properly, or the way I like them, it makes it look like the hoses are actually connected, even though they're not really, and even though the air hoses wouldn't be connected to the couplers, but when you look at it, it almost looks like it's connected, close to real. That's my approach to it. So let's take a look at one of my cars. And you can see how I've got the trip pins bent up, and I cut them off because if you run it with plows, that'll cause you lots of trouble. So I'm going to show you my technique for doing that in just a minute. And you can see them there. I try to get them as close as I can so they're all the same height. So you'll need a couple of basic tools to do this. One is this Kadee bendy tool. As you can see, it's got 3 different ridges in it for each scale. Depending on the coupler that I'm using, I sometimes use the smallest one, and I sometimes use the middle one, never the large one. And you're going to need something to cut the trip pin to make it shorter, so I use this Xuron tool. Works pretty well for the job. And the other thing that you're going to need is a Kadee height gauge. This can be your best friend when it comes to making coupler heights and making your cars run properly. Another thing, because I have trip pins on my cars, you can use this magnetic decoupler, because I don't like the idea of constantly touching my rolling stock. I like the idea of coming over here next to the car, and I don't think I can do this with one hand, but if you stick this on here just right and you wiggle the 2 cars, they come uncoupled just like that. I can do it a lot better if I'm not holding the video camera, but you get the general idea of what's going on. There's also another thing. We have some skewers around here, wooden skewers that I was using as my pointer tool. You can use that to kind of open up the couplers, or you can do the crude and but effective way by lifting the car up like this and moving it. But you can sometimes derail the car doing that, and again you're touching the car constantly, which I really don't like doing. But anyway, those are some ways. Okay, now I'm going to show you what I do with the Kadee couplers. When they come from the factory out of the box or out of the package, depending on how you get them, the trip pin hangs down way too low and it's way too long. As you can see, it comes out beyond the coupler itself right here. So this is going to pose a big problem to you when you have plows on locomotives. They're going to hit and you're going to have all kinds of problems coupling them. So what I do is I just take my tool and I get in here. It's kind of hard to do this in front of the camera, but you're going to get the general idea. Is I put the tool all the way up to the top of the coupler and I bend it as much as I can. See how it bent the coupler like that? It's, whoops, how it's looped up like that. Then I take the Xuron tool and I cut the coupler, or cut the trip pin rather, not the coupler, even with the end of the coupler, like this. Yeah, if I get it in the right spot here, like that. That way, it no longer is too long, and it will also work with the magnet. It'll pull the trip pin with the magnet. So that's how I do it. And you don't have problems with the coupler hitting the switches. Also, another key factor is the wheels again, but more specifically the bolster on the bottom. Some of these cars need washers, and I'll zoom in. You can kind of see that red washer right there. That's a red one, which is thicker, and then when we look down here, that's a gray one. So what you do is you take your Kadee height gauge, you set your piece of rolling stock on the track, and you, whoops, hard doing this one-handed, okay. Once you got the car on the track, you can take your height gauge here, and you want that to line up perfectly. And if it does, all your cars will match up nicely, and you won't have derailment and uncoupling problems. Like I say, on this particular car, I needed a red washer on one side to even it out, and a gray one on the other side. Several of these cars I ran into that. It wasn't the same on each side. Some cars I even had to put a red and a gray on one side and maybe a gray on the other side. Or some cars I had two reds on one, two grays, etc., etc. But what you want to do is, no matter what it takes, you want your couplers lined up. But if you get too many, you might have problems screwing it into the body of the car, because you might not have enough thread. And I also ran into that on some of my model die casting kits, because the screws that they give you a lot of times are too short. So in that case, it becomes a pain in the neck. You can either try to put a little glue in there and just let the screw stay, and sometimes you can thread it. I forget what I did with another one. I think I played around a little bit with some hot glue on some. It all depends on the situation that you run into, but that's just a few pointers that I wanted to give to you, which has helped me, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to run the long trains on this layout that I'm running. And again, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to write it below. Thanks for watching. See you next time.